So, welcome to our second seminar in the 2019 seminar series, which is about playing our part in the city region. And this subject is homelessness and rough sleeping tonight. I want to welcome you to the Fashion Hub, which is where we are, part of the Tapestry in the Fabric District. And this emerging neighbourhood in the city centre is notorious to a previous generation as the Red Light District. And it's being reborn thanks to the vision and passion of some local businesses. Particularly, I want to name Jason Abbott and Richard and Susie Jenions, who have been working quietly and passionately to bring this neighbourhood to a different place. Since 2014, Jason got the lease on this particular building, and a huge effort has gone into developing the area as a place for creative, fashion, and new businesses to become established. And they're building culture into the offer as well. So for the past 2 years, they've run, in May, the very successful Fabric District Arts Festival. The context in which our 3 seminars are taking place is, of course, the threat of Brexit, which, as we know tonight, is a step nearer to actually happening, certainly with a deal being agreed within the EU. We now have another hurdle to get over. Not that I particularly want us to get over that hurdle, personally speaking, but that's where we are. And when the Engage board was designing our seminar series this year, one of the things we looked at was the sense that the country as a whole is somehow shrinking, that our mentality is declining. We're seeming to be pulling ourselves away from a lot of the broader connections that we've had and saying, we can go it alone. We're fine. We don't need you. And we wondered, how can we, as a small, voluntary, social enterprise, do something to counteract that trend? And we came up with the idea that the next step for us here to broaden ourselves is to stop thinking of us as the city centre, which is what Engage works with, the residents of the city centre and the waterfront, and put ourselves in the bigger context of the city region. So let's think beyond the city centre. Think of the wider context of the whole region. And we've done that by looking at 2 particular issues, cycling and walking, which we had 2 weeks ago. Well, you cannot resolve that issue just by building a few cycle lanes in the city centre. We need a whole strategy that links cycling from Southport and Widnes and Hoylake right across to come into this hub of the city region here. And we felt that homelessness and rough sleeping was a similar thing. We can't solve this by just trying to work out what we can do with a few homeless people in the city centre. It's a problem of the region. We need to be much bigger in how we look at it. So that's been very much part of what we're looking at in the series. And the third one, which is in 2 weeks' time, on Brexit Day, if it has happened by then completely, just by chance it's on that night, we put our dates in well over 12 months ago, and we weren't thinking that in October the 31st we were going to be having a Brexit event. But we're looking on that night at what Brexit means for the governance and devolution of Liverpool City Region. So whether you're delighted we've come out, or whether you're really depressed that it's actually come through, it'll be a good place to be in 2 weeks' time tonight. So that's really important. So the issue which we're looking at tonight is looking at the increasing numbers of people who are homeless. And that's, we feel that it can only properly be addressed in the context of the whole region, and in fact at the national level as well. The residents who are here tonight from the city centre and the waterfront are the people who every day encounter homeless people on our streets. We live here permanently. Every single day we see it. And I have not yet met a single person who lives here who feels in the least bit comfortable with what's going on. And those of us who are born and bred in Liverpool, as I am and some of the board are, know that it was never like this. This is something that's happened in the last 10 years or perhaps a little bit longer. We've never had this crisis. So we wanted to do something positive to try and address it. We're not a homeless organisation. We are a resident-based group that want to make the city centre a sustainable place for everybody. We want to improve the quality of life for everybody so that people can choose to live in the city centre. We think city centre living is a very sustainable choice, even to bring up your family. If we could only persuade developers to create the kind of properties families could live in. If we could only persuade the city council and others to agree that elderly people need a lot more places to sit down in the city centre, can't walk for hours and not have a place where you can rest, and so on. And families, there's not a single park, not a swing anywhere in the whole of the city centre. How can you possibly bring up children and not have some simple, basic facilities? The schools are good. Got some excellent primary schools and some emerging secondary schools. So it's really important to look at some of the stuff what Engage is trying to do. So for each seminar, we've invited a deputy portfolio speaker from the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority. And tonight we welcome Councillor Trish Hardy from the Litherland Ward in Sefton. And we'll introduce her later. But before I introduce our speakers properly, I want you to introduce yourselves. Just say who you are, why you're here, maybe where you've come from, and please introduce yourself to someone you didn't come with. So don't introduce yourself to your partner or your mates that you've come with. Please turn around, find someone you don't know, and just say, my name's Sue, and I'm from the city centre or the waterfront, and why you're here tonight. So just 2 or 3 minutes, please. Make sure everybody gets introduced and meets somebody new here tonight. So while you're taking some notes on that, I want to welcome our 3 local activists tonight. Nearest to me, we've got, I'll ask him to stand up. Can you all see everybody there? Can you see at the back clearly? Only because he's small. John Finnegan is the chief exec of Liverpool Homeless Football Club. Next to him, who's a bit taller, Nigel Miller, who's chair of Emmaus Merseyside, and he'll tell us a little bit about that later. And David Carter, who's the chief exec of the Whitechapel Centre. So we're really grateful to you coming, and these are people who are actively involved in working with people who are homeless. So I want to thank our sponsors tonight who've made the series possible, particularly the Regenda Group, really grateful to them, Promenade Estates and Planet Intelligent Environments. And it's particularly good tonight to welcome Andy Carberry, who's here. He's the Director of Care and Support at Petrus, part of the Regenda Group. So now let me introduce our main speaker, all the way from Finland today, from the far north of Europe. And I'm delighted to be able to say tonight, welcome to a fellow member of the European community. I'm sorry we're not going to be able to say that, I think, for much longer, but tonight it feels really nice to welcome somebody else who's in the European Union. So, Juha Kahila is project coordinator at Y Foundation and is responsible for coordinating the national Housing First network. And at the moment, they're into a 3-year national action plan for preventing homelessness in Finland. Their work began in 2008. He'll tell us a bit more about it, but they're now in the last phase of a 2016-2019 3-year plan that's bearing extraordinary results. If it wasn't working, I can assure you, we would not have paid for Juha to come here. We wouldn't. Why would you bring someone to talk about something that isn't working? So he's here because he is the best example in the whole of Europe of somebody who single-handedly knows what it's like to actually eradicate completely rough sleeping in Helsinki and the whole of Finland. Now that's awesome. That's amazing. And thank you for applauding that. And we're going to hear how that's been possible and what they've done. So this action plan, the Housing First Network, is a partnership project, as you'd expect. You can't do this single-handedly. There are 5 NGOs working with homeless people. The Y Foundation, Helsinki Deaconess Institute, No Fixed Abode, an NGO, Street Mission in Rauma region. and the Finnish Blue Ribbon. That's not a biscuit, by the way. The Y Foundation is responsible for running the whole project. Previously, Juha has worked for almost 10 years as the Chief Exec and Service Manager at the Finnish Youth Housing Association, which is a company that provides and develops floating support services for young homeless people using the Housing First model. He has a master's degree in social services and is also a board member of the Finnish Counselling Service Association. And responding to Juha tonight from the City Region Combined Authority is Councillor Trish Hardy, who, as I said earlier, is the Deputy Portfolio Holder for Housing and Spatial Framework and is a Labour Councillor for Litherland Ward in Sefton Metropolitan Borough Council. Please welcome now to the podium Juha Kahila.
It's my absolute pleasure to be here tonight with all you people. And if I speak too loudly, just raise your hand, because yesterday we had our National Homeless Seminar, and we had a rock band there, and they were playing really loud. I was sitting in the front row and nodding my head like this, but now I can't hear so good. So if I speak too loudly or I can't hear your answers, just raise your hands and I pick you up. But like Jerry said, I work at the Y Foundation. Been working there 1 year, and before that 10 years at the Finnish Youth Housing Association, where we build homes for young people, targeting to work life. And worked there nearly 10 years as Chief Executive Officer, and now 1 year in the Y Foundation. And I'm really looking forward to the end of the session to hear all your good questions, because I think my presentation will bring quite many of them. But now I'm going to tell you in 30 minutes the story of Finland from 2008 to today, how it's possible to have a whole country without rough sleepers, because nowadays it seems impossible. Anywhere you go, you see homeless people living on the streets. And in Finland, we think that's not right, because I think housing should be a human right for everybody. If you agree, raise your hand. Ray. This is the Y Foundation in a nutshell, funded by 5 largest cities: Lutheran Church, Red Cross, Association of Mental Health, local regional authorities. And I think the most important thing is that the Confederation of Construction Industries and the Construction Trade Union were part of founding the Y Foundation. And today we have around 150 employees, and the main thing that we are doing is we buy and construct affordable social housing for people. And at the moment we have a housing stock about 17,000 apartments all around Finland, but main proportion of those apartments are in the Helsinki metropolitan area. And 10,000 of those apartments are normal social housing, very affordable, and 7,000 are meant for special groups, especially for homeless people. And that 7,000 flats we buy directly from the private market and rent them directly to the homeless people. We don't offer any support. All the support comes from NGOs and our other partners. So this is the fact that we are dealing with nowadays. Homelessness is decreasing in recent years in Finland. We are the only EU country that has been able to do it. I like to say EU because there is one other country, Norway, but it's not part of the EU, so let's stick on the EU side. And last year's statistics show that we have 5,500 homeless people. But I think the key thing here is to understand that 80% of those people are living with their relatives or friends. But we still consider them homeless people because they don't have their own apartment, their own tenancy. So I think that is the main difference in the statistics when we compare them to other countries where these kind of people, they wouldn't be counted as homeless people. And here you can see the role that we have been going on. So the numbers are going down steadily and surely. Let's see what number for this year is going to be, but I think we're going to be decreasing the numbers again. But we have to wait till March. This is the housing first in Finland and how we understand it. We think that housing as a basic human and social right. Everybody should have their own apartment, their own key, where they can go, have a rest, do whatever they want. In normal surroundings and permanent homes, we don't really believe in the temporary accommodation. We think that's not the way to do things. You should have a permanent tenancy because in that way you can really have a safety in your pocket in a way. Because you don't have to be afraid that one day you're going to lose your tenancy because you don't have a permanent contract. Support if needed and wanted. I think that is one of the main things. You have to have flexible support for homeless people and if wanted and needed. Well, I could say that 98% of the people in Finland, they want the support. There are always the exceptions that maybe at the first they don't want the support, but when we try to engage them and of course we call them and knock on the door, eventually they will engage and start to trust the support workers. And I think that's the key thing, you never should give up. And normality. Normal rent contract. I live in rent apartment. I have the same rights, same responsibilities as any other people who's living in the housing first accommodation. So we think that's only fair thing. So this is the implementation that started 2008. We have 2 national programs about ending the long-term homelessness, which run between 2008 and 2015. And we did a pretty good job. We don't have long-term homeless people anymore, not so much. And I think the main thing here is that we did it with a wide partnership. There were state ministries, cities, NGOs, both local and national level. Nobody did it alone. They all were involved in the process from the beginning, as well as the homeless people, of course, because you can't really talk about their things without having them in the process. So I think that's also one key thing to remember. And we implement at the same time and housing first and introduce the systemic change. And what we did, I'm going to show you some pictures later on, but we convert all our shelters, except one, to supported housing units. I'm going to tell you later on what is supported housing unit. But at the moment, in the city of Helsinki, which has roughly 600,000 people, we only have one shelter with 52 bed places, and that's enough. And that's what we mean from temporary to permanent housing. Because if you don't have the shelters and hostels, then you really have to build the apartments or supported housing units to people. And now we are on the action plan for preventing homelessness, and I'm going to talk that also a little bit later. This is pretty much the same slide. I just mess up a little bit. And here are the results that we have from the long-term homeless programs. Over 3,500 new apartments built or purchased for homeless people. And these really were for homeless people, not anybody else. Services, 300 new professional support workers in housing social work all around Finland. And I would say that nowadays we have something like 1,000 support workers nationwide, and next year we're going to have some more. But you really need to have good amount of support workers if you're going to have good quality support for these people with complex needs. And housing advice, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as well. But the structural reforms, housing first principle has been established. What I mean by that is that many people in Finland who work in the field or just a regular everyday Joe, they don't even remember the staircase model anymore. The support workers who come to services, they only know the housing first model. But I have to remind you that we have been doing this 11 years. It didn't happen like in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. It has been a constantly commitment to the work that we have been doing, and always reminding people that this is the way we want to do, and this is the way to help really help these people. But housing first in no way is an easy or quick fix. I can show you that. And this is the latest program that we have been doing, and it's going to end in a couple of months. And we had a new government elected last May, and they have been written in their program that in Finland we should halve the homelessness by 23 and end it completely by 27. And that's not a dream, that's not a vision, that's a goal, that's achievable if we continue to do the same work as we have been doing. Bringing all the services, state ministries, local authorities, housing providers, service users together and doing the work. But in this program, we have been really concentrating about preventing homelessness, because what we also learned when we were reducing the long-term homelessness, that as the numbers were going down, there was always new homeless people that were coming up to the systems. And we really think that we have to do something about that, because even though we help the formerly homeless people, we still can't afford to have new homeless people. So that's what we have been doing. And I think the main thing here has been really the housing advice services. What that means is that if you have some kind of problems with your rent or neighbors or anything that comes in your life, anything can happen. You can have a divorce, you can get sick, and you just can't afford to pay your rent for a reason or another. You can call to these housing advisors and make a plan with them how to pay your rent in a smaller portions. Or it can be something totally different. They can come to you in the services and help you to have the right services just for you. But with those housing advisors, only last year, 4,500 evictions were prevented. And that number is huge. And if you think that in Finland, one eviction cost approximately 5,000 euros, you can see that it's also a sustainable solution financially. And that's one thing that we are really proud of. And from the beginning of next year, the housing advisors, there's going to be a law that every citizen in Finland should be able to contact housing advisors. And then we also have the debt counseling, which are working closely with the housing advice services together. So, what made the change possible? It didn't happen in overnight. There were money incentives for renovation, for the shelters, to make them supported housing units. But it included a stick. So the service providers would get a grant from the state and a cheap loan from the state to make the renovation, but only one condition. You have to make it housing first. If you didn't make it, we're not going to buy any services from you. So it was pretty straightforward, I would say. You do this that we want you to do, or you don't, and we won't buy the services. But I think that is one of the key things that really changed the system. Because if we have given the service providers a choice to do something else, I think some of them would have. And it wasn't an easy process. For example, Salvation Army, they were negotiating 3 years if they want to get involved with the housing first. And I'm super glad that they did eventually, but it didn't come in overnight. And of course, money for cities to hire the new support workers, because if we're going to change the system, we're going to need new support workers to do the work and have the support for the people. And the main thing, always collaboration, working together. Not a single organization or state or NGO can own the homelessness. You really need to have all the players in the table and try to solve it together. That's the only way. You need to have the housing providers, service providers, state, local authorities, support workers, people with lived experience, peer workers. You need to have everybody on board and have the same vision what to do next. Because if you miss one part or take one player out of the table, then you're going to be in trouble. That's what we have learned. And of course, the flexibility of support, because there are many people with complex needs. They may need the support every day, 2 times a day, or whatever, but there's also the people that may need only once a month. So you have to have the flexibility there to really see what people need. And this I can't really stress enough, housing from several channels, including the social housing, flats acquired from the private market, and of course the new housing. This is the combination that we have been doing in Finland, and it has worked pretty well, but we still need more affordable housing. That's the fact. This is Alppikatu, supported housing unit run by Salvation Army. It used to be a shelter with 240 bed places. They made the renovation, which cost 10 million euros. And remember, they got the money from the state, cheap loans and grants. And now it has 80 apartments, 80 studio apartments, and everybody has their own tenancy, their own rent contract for unlimited time. And in the downstairs, there's on-site staff 24/7 available. So when you need support, you can just walk downstairs and it's there. And what we have learned that this is the probably the best solution for the people with very complex needs. They can have their own apartment, but the support is very near and available 24/7. But of course, if you don't have any need for support, you can still live there as long as you want, because you have a permanent rent contract, which is the base for the whole housing first concept. But this is just one example of what we have done in Finland. We have many supported housing units like this. This is one of the biggest ones, 80 apartments. There are a few that has over 100 apartments, but there are many that has 20 to 35 apartments. So if I could say, I said the sweet spot is something like 25 to 40 apartments, but these big units, they work as well. And this picture is before the renovation. So you would enter the building and there's a guard. And depending if he's in a good mood, he would let you in. If not, back on the streets. That's the old way. They had lots of power over the homeless people. They can decide whether you can come in or not. And if you can come in, that's the best place for you. So if we think about 240 beds like that, only few members of that, which are basically guards, they can't give you any support. They just can allow you to come in or not allow. So, why to get rid of the shelters? 2008 we have 600 bed places and hostels in Helsinki. Now we have the only one with 52 places. But I must mention that it's a service center in a way, I would say, because there is doctors, nurses, social workers, and support workers on that service center, and they can give you the right kind of support you need and guide you through the system to the housing first. And because living in a hostel or shelter is always a temporary solution. Imagine yourself living in a flat that you have only a tenancy for 6 months, 8 months, 1 year at a time, and every time you have to be a little bit scared if my tenancy would continue or not. I wouldn't like to live like that. No privacy, very limited professional help, and hostel sustain, I would say, some kind of culture of irresponsibility, because you come and go, you don't have responsibilities, there's the workers don't have time for you, so you just come and go and try to survive in a way. And renovation of hostels has increased the public safety. So, for example, the Alppikatu, which has had 240 bed places and now has 80 apartments, the neighborhood is more safe. Because when we started the renovation, we brought the neighborhood along. So we were very open what we are going to do. So the shelter is going to go, and we're going to build this support housing unit instead. And because the neighborhood were involved from the very beginning, they had quite a positive view to this place, because they could share their worries and possible safety issues beforehand. There were meetings with the staff and the tenants who were about to live in this building, and the local police were also part of these meetings to share their opinions. And the local police always thought that this is a good way to do things, because it has been proved that police is needed less in the supported housing units than that all these people would live on the streets. So that's one thing I'd like you to remember. Whatever you are doing, just be open and honest, because if you really don't say what you're going to do, it's going to backfire you sooner or later. So this is what the apartments look like now when we did the renovation. 20 to 30 square meter studio apartments, own kitchen, bathroom, just a basic normal rental apartment that you would find across the street from the private market as well. Same quality, everything. Really nice. And these are the housing options for homeless persons in Helsinki. So as you can see, the hostel and shelter, the places have been going down pretty dramatically. So from the 85, we had around 2,000 places, and now those 52 places. And at the same time, the supported housing has been going up, and the independent rental apartments as well has been going up. Social housing apartments, they have been going up from the 85 to 2008, but still then they have pretty much stick the same. But you can see see how the system has really changed. This is my favorite slide from the whole presentation, so if you're going to take one picture of the presentation, take this one. Because here is the short-term solutions. Managing homelessness, temporary accommodation, shelters, hostels somewhere in the between. This is the easy part, I would say. Because all you need is money, actually. You just build more shelters, more hostels, and you call it a day. That's really easy, I would say. Then when you have homeless people, you can just say, okay, we have this new shelter, you can have a place there, or try to go there. I think that's really easy. This end, on the other half, that's the hard part. That takes time. But what I know, that is the only way to really solve the homelessness issues. You really have to work hard. You have to be commitment to the hard work. You really have to get your hands dirty. But at the end of the day, it really pays off. Homeless people get their apartments, and during this 11 years time that we have been doing it, we are now actually saving money. Because every homeless people we get out of the systems from their relatives or, for example, 2008 from the streets. And we have them apartment, and the support, it saves 15,000 euros per year per person to do it. And there's a researches about that we have done in Finland, but also worldwide researches show the same results. So you actually end up saving money while giving people permanent apartments. And I think that's pretty amazing thing. Yeah. So this is the other Europe, the other truth, I would say. A few green spots, Finland and Norway, otherwise pretty red. Things have been going pretty bad way for most of the Europe countries. Here are the challenges that we have been seeing that there are in Europe. Short-term solutions, short pilot projects, for example, 1 year. I had a phone call from Chile a few weeks ago, and they were doing a pilot for 1 year, and they were asking, how should we do it? And I said, don't do it at all. If you're going to do it for 1 year, why bother? Housing first takes time. You can't really have any results in 1 year or 2 years. You really have to commit your whole system to do it for the many years to come. And of course, no national programs, but Scotland is doing a pretty good job at the moment, and I think there's going to be a quite good national program regarding housing first, and I'm really looking forward to it. Lack of housing, including Finland, we have the same problem. I think that's a problem pretty much any country, and especially in the big cities as Liverpool. And also how to start housing first, developing the support for different needs, social integration, and I think cooperation between different sectors, I have been seeing it as one of the main problems in many countries, because the different sectors, they don't really talk to each other, they're not sharing the tables, and that's a huge problem in my opinion. Lack of prevention work. Many countries are doing a great job having the people out of the street, but at the same time, people are dropping back to the streets. And of course, the general attitude. I can say that, of course, in Finland, we had the general opinion about housing first when we started. It wasn't like all glorified and yes, this is what we all want to do. No, it wasn't. It really took a lot of work to convince people that this really works. And when we did the work for years and years, people start to see that, hey, this really works and we don't have the homeless people on the streets anymore. What has happened? Well, housing first happened. And this is especially, I think, challenge in England. If we compare the social housing completions in England and Finland together, as you can see, in Finland we are actually building more social housing at the moment than England. And we are having approximately 5.5 million people living in Finland, and I think England have few more million people living, so you can see where the problem really lies. But here are the successes from the Europe. Housing first works. Also, in other countries, not just in Finland, housing retention rate 80 to 95, depending on the city and the country. Organizations have found new ways to help the most vulnerable people. Mind shift. What I mean by that is that it's equal professionalism, so the support workers don't get to say that you have to go to a rehab or you have to go to a whatever place. No, you just discuss it together with the client, and at the end of the day, the client is the one who's making the decision. If it's the wrong one, well, of course, then you support the wrong decision. And then you try it again, and again, and again, because it really takes time. In Housing First, you can have a customer for anything between 6 months to 6 years, I would say. I have been doing support work myself, and my longest customer relationship lasted 5 years. So I think that gives a good perspective. And there's these joint forces. If you want to know more about the Housing First Europe Hub, which is really trying to help all the cities and organizations and countries to develop Housing First and how to really scale it up, this is the place to go, and you can put Google just Housing First Europe Hub and you find a nice website. So, to sum it up, you need alternative housing solutions, flexible support. One size does not fit for all. Of course, at first you need to have money, but I can't stress enough that when we started 2008, there was a huge financial crisis in the whole world, and we still had the money because we thought it was the right thing to do. Collaboration, can't stress enough. And not a single organization can own solving the homelessness. You really need all the players in the same table. The state, cities, NGOs, associations, social housing companies, you have to have them all on board. And what is required to end homelessness now and in the future? More affordable social housing, unconditional independent housing with the right kind of support, not possible without partnership, from temporary to permanent housing. And in Finland, we have reached a point of no return. As I mentioned before, that new workers, they don't even know about the staircase models or temporary solutions anymore. It's just Housing First. And we are currently in Finland developing the Housing First 2.0. What does it mean? I can't really say at this day, but hopefully next spring it's going to be ready, and we'll be more than happy to share all the information with everybody who's interested. And the time that remains, that's one thing that we have been thinking about a lot, and what I mean by that is that I think we are now in a good spot in a way how we can really scale up Housing First, because I think everybody's more or less talking about it, but we have about 10 years to do it in the whole Europe. Then we're going to have new problems. For example, climate change. That's going to cause some big problems. And at the end of the day, the political view and the money will go to solve those problems. So 10 to 12 years, take it somewhere between that time. I think that's the time that we really have to solve the problem, as in Finland, but also in Europe. And finally, you can't have Housing First without having housing. I think you could answer first. But that's it for me. Thank you very much.